My name's Joan Woodard, and I'm the hearing examiner this evening. The purpose of this hearing is to allow me to receive evidence and testimony on the matters that are pending. I make a recommendation only to the county commissioners. I do not make the final decision. I will be submitting my recommendation to staff within 2 weeks of this evening's hearing. The application will then be scheduled for deliberations before the county commissioners. If you wish to give testimony and you're here in person, I need you to fill out one of the sheets in the back. And when you come to the podium, please give your name and address for the record before you begin your testimony. If you're on Zoom, when we open the hearing up for Zoom comments, David Callahan will manage that, and again, name and address for the record. First, staff will introduce the application, then we will hear from the applicant. After the applicant's testimony, we will then get into public comment sheets. We will hear from those who are in favor, those who are neutral, and then those who are opposed. The public not speaking will be read into the record. We will then give the applicant and/or their representative an opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony stated into the record from the public before we close the public hearing. After that point, we will receive no more testimony. The time limits are 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 5 minutes for each public testimony, and 15 minutes for applicant rebuttal. If you're in the room, we'll be using the green, yellow, red to help you keep time. If you're on Zoom, we probably have a timer that will be used. I would ask that you direct all your testimony to me and not to the audience. Any questions with this proceeding for this evening? Okay. Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner and members of the audience. I want to lead off by apologizing. We are here this evening because it's my fault that I forgot that RLUIPA, meaning the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, applies to any church use like this when it goes through a public hearing review. I'm well aware of that. I've been trained in it since the year 2000. I just haven't actually needed to do it for the last 8 years. And
Hearing.
no wonder.
I could hear you just fine. Sorry.
So it's my fault that we're here. I'll own this one. But the critical part, in my view, is that we are correcting our error. Since it's in tonight's review of the case gives you the opportunity to entirely consider this case with the additional 4 criterion that are listed in the Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act. And once that is done, we have met the letter of the law, and then the case can go forward to the Board of County Commissioners properly. I would add that we didn't expressly say in our notice whether this would be a de novo, meaning a new hearing, or with sideboards limited only to RLUIPA. I think that's really your call. My view is that you've heard everything once. You could suggest to the audience that unless you have something new to add that wasn't added in the last hearing, we'd like to keep it focused on the RLUIPA aspects of this case. But that's your call, not mine. You could treat this as de novo if it's entirely your discretionary call.
Well, I think that we had enough interest in this matter, both prior to tonight's hearing and what I see in the audience here tonight, that we will take whatever testimony the public wishes to share.
Fair enough.
That I think that's the right way to go. Okay?
Makes sense to me. Unless you have questions of me, I'll turn things over to Vlad, who's got a PowerPoint prepared for us.
Sounds good. Okay, so we'll open the hearing with CUP 19-0004.
Vlad, take it away.
Can everybody hear me quite well?
Draw a little closer to the mic.
Okay. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. Madam Hearing Examiner, I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I can go through to recap the highlights of the request, similarly as we did with the first public hearing held last September. Is Is that something that you're interested in pursuing?
Yes, I think that would be worthwhile.
Okay, great. So as you just stated, this is a request by Upper Columbia Seventh-day Adventist for approval of a conditional use permit in case number CUP 19-0004. This request includes a private school and a place of worship. The request, or the subject parcel of land on which the request is proposed, is located north of the city of Eden.
Vlad, let me interrupt you for just a moment. For anyone that's on Zoom, please mute yourself at this time. We need only the staff to be presenting.
Do you have a mute everyone button that you can,
I do.
somewhere on there you should.
Sounds like we got it.
Can we proceed?
Hang on just a second, Vlad. There's a couple I need to mute. That should do it. Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
As I just stated, the subject parcel of land on which their request for a conditional use permit is requested is located north of Hayden Lake. It's specifically located at the intersection of Rimrock and Lancaster Road. The subject parcel is 10 acres in size. It's located in the agricultural zone. And the comp plan designation is country. As you can see, based on the photos of the existing conditions on the property, a majority of the property is fairly level with an existing farmhouse that appears to be in a dilapidated state. Should this project move forward, the intent of the applicant is to remove the structure off-site and make way for the new improvements on-site. The request is proposed in a couple different phases. The first phase would be a private school that would consist of approximately 20,000 square feet, and it would be associated with the educational purposes. The build-out after a 5-year period, should the application be approved, would consist of approximately 100 students. The second phase to this request is to construct a place of worship, which would be approximately 22,000 square feet. And after full build-out, within the 5-year period, the applicant wishes to have as many as 300 parishioners attend the facility. This would be one building constructed in phases. As you can see, based on the site plan and the proposed renderings by the architect, this is a facility that would be in a total of 40 plus thousand square feet in size. Based on the previous public hearing held on September 17th, 2020, the architect at the time had explained that the structure was designed in a way or in a manner where it would sit off of the a distance away from the main arterial and be designed in what he had stated in an agrarian manner where it would blend in with the existing agricultural community north of Lancaster Road. Through the agency comment period, we solicited comments from the agencies that are listed on this slide. The applicant is requesting to connect the project site to North Kootenai Water and Sewer District as well as Hayden Lake Sewer District. We received will serve letters from both agencies as well as comments from the Highway District where the applicant would be required to enter into a road development agreement for future improvements of the intersection and adjoining right-of-way should this application move forward. During the first public comment period, we received one comment in support with 45 comments in opposition with concerns regarding traffic, compatibility concerns, and so forth. Based on the original public hearing conducted on September 17th of 2020, the hearing examiner, after hearing the testimony from the public and the applicant, came back with a recommendation for denial. As Director Callahan had stated in his introductory statement, it was brought to our attention that we failed to recognize the RLUPA requirements in assessment of this request. That being said, in conjunction with the request for a public hearing from the applicant, the Board of County Commissioners on October 8th made a motion to remand the request to the hearing examiner for assessment of our LUPA standards. That being said, the hearing examiner was given the option of making an amended recommendation with or without the public hearing. In December of last year, the hearing examiner concluded that it would be prudent to open the public hearing to the public to hear the testimony on both sides and assessment of the ARLUPA guidelines. During the second public comment period for tonight's hearing, we received 33 comments in support, 88 comments in opposition with the same concerns as raised during the first public comment period. In that, in those opposition comments, we received a link to a live petition online where we had over 1,000 comments or signatures in opposition of the request. The last time I checked, we had close to 1,080 plus signatures. After the end of the public comment period, which is 10 days prior to today, we received 17 late comments that have not been analyzed by staff, but have been added by our administrative staff for your review and consideration. That being said, that concludes my brief presentation. I do stand for any questions that you have at this time. Otherwise, the guidelines for our LUPA review and analysis have been provided in the updated, in the amended staff report on remand for your review and analysis. And I will turn it over to you at this time.
Vlad, I think it might be useful if you took just a moment, because in so much of the public comment that went into the report for today, there's still confusion, I think, amongst the public about what the difference is between a rezoning and a conditional use permit. I think their comments all relate well to a conditional use permit, but just help to explain that difference.
Absolutely. So there is a distinct difference between the process of going through a rezone review versus a conditional use permit. The main distinction is that while it is a request made by an individual or a entity, it is a quasi-judicial matter, but the rezone is more a legislative matter because it rezones the entire county zoning map to include a newly approved zoning classification. When a rezone process goes through the review, it requires one public hearing in front of the hearing examiner and a subsequent public hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners. What that does is the rezone process establishes a new zoning classification that then opens up the review by our department of the permitted uses, conditional uses, and special uses. So that opens up, that basically creates a new zone with a new set of parameters for review. When a request is made for a conditional use permit, it's a quasi-judicial matter that's has to go through a public hearing as well. However, it only requires a public hearing in front of the hearing examiner, and in the event that the recommendation from the hearing examiner is not favorable to either the applicant or the opposition, either of the two parties have the option to request a public hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners. It is not necessary, but it is a possibility. So what the conditional use permit approves is a specific request on the existing zoning designation. The conditional use permit is exactly what it is. It's a self-explanatory term. It approves a use with a set of conditions for mitigation of impacts associated with request. In this case, the applicant is not requesting a rezone. They are requesting a conditional use permit on the within the agricultural zone. Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code Title 8 allows for review of a conditional use permit for a private school and a place of worship. County staff has reviewed the application based on the merits of the case, meaning that we reviewed the findings of fact, applicable legal standards, and conclusions of law to make a recommendation, make a professional recommendation to the hearing body. Our recommendation to the hearing body for the September 17th, 2020 hearing was favorable to the applicant. Through the review process and public testimony on that date, the hearing examiner disagreed with staff's recommendation and subsequently recommended denial. In a nutshell, the summary of a conditional use permit difference between a zone change is it's a specific use with specific sideboards and conditions of approval set forth in the decision by the Board of County Commissioners. Does that help you as well as the public understand the difference between the two?
Yes, thanks, Vlad.
Madam
Callahan?
Hearing Examiner, I think I can add a capstone that might actually simplify things. Conditional use permits have been a creature of municipal zoning since the 1920s when the first model codes went out. It has, since that point in time, always been contemplated all across the United States that it's a use that may or may not be approved based on whether it's compatible with a neighborhood. It's the way in the 1920s that planners tried to make zoning, categorical zoning, somewhat flexible. So there is a reasonable argument that this is something of a rezoning because it's going from a point that doesn't allow churches at the moment to a point that might, if you were to recommend approval and the board did. But again, the conditional part is, the whole idea is you may or may not approve and subject to conditions. So it's a zoning tool that's been long in place. It's appropriate for the applicant to request it. It's appropriate for it to go through this process. And it is very different from a categorical rezoning, which Vlad described amply. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move along. First, we'll hear from the applicant. We have David Morgan. I don't have, is he here?
Oh,
okay.
well, in that case,
We'll look for him.
what's his name? Greg and Sandy, if you would just unmute yourselves, you have the floor. I'm not seeing him.
Have you had a text from them or something that they're having trouble?
Well, I wouldn't know right
No,
now.
I'm
Okay.
asking David.
That's odd. I don't even see him on the list. Can you make a call? Okay.
Okay, well, we'll wait to hear from your representatives. In the meantime, so do you wish to speak tonight? Okay. And I apologize to anyone whose name I mispronounce, but some of you have unusual handwriting. Brady Hay? Oh, got it. In favor, may wish to speak.
They're not showing up. They may not have the right link. They're not in the waiting list.
Brent, do you wish to speak tonight? Okay. Don Eckenroth, in favor, may wish to speak. Okay. David Stetzelberger? Whoops, we just went over to opposed. We're going to wait and see if, before we shift over from,
There appears to be an issue with perhaps not having the correct link, and they may have tried to connect to a different
Oh.
meeting. They're on right now trying to relink.
How about, why don't we take a 5-minute recess? I'll go to my computer. I will send it to the applicant's representatives, make sure they have the right one. Does
Okay.
that work?
okay.
Because I don't know how else to make this, if they're floundering with the wrong link.
Well, I advised them of the. It's on the agenda. Yeah, we sent it over to them.
Oh, well, they should be able to just pull it off of that.
They don't know what's going on.
Well, then he definitely has the wrong link.
I assume this is, David, this is your attorney who's going to speak to Arlupa. So that's kind of key to this evening's hearing. Yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute break and let them
See
see
what
if
I
they
can
can.
find on
hear from the applicant's representative. Name and address for the record, please.
Michael, go right ahead.
Greg?
Okay, my name is Sandy Young.
Oh,
My
okay.
address is 601 East Front Avenue, Coeur d'Alene. And my colleague Greg Embry and I will be giving a dual presentation tonight. My testimony is going to focus on the comp plan, and then Greg's will focus on RLUIPA as well as traffic impacts. I'm sorry that we came in late. I missed the presentation by the county, so that leaves me a little bit at a disadvantage, but I'm just going to take my presentation as I had said it. So the comp plan designation for this site, as everyone knows, is country, and it's a designation whose primary purpose is to promote ag uses that are compatible with rural residential development. Also, that second portion of the primary purpose is to allow residential and non-residential uses to exist side by side. And my statement tonight is that there is no better mechanism to get there than with the conditional use permit that allows agencies as well as the county to impose any type of condition that will help mitigate any differences between residential and non-residential uses. It's interesting in the county, or I'm sorry, in the country designation that the comp plan actually gives examples of some uses that may be allowed and be in compliance with the comp plan, and those are things such as gas stations, convenience stores, manufacturing plants. Certainly a church school in a residential area is a use that was premeditated or prepondered when placing residences in an area. So I feel that this request is fully in support of the comp plan's first goal, but then the second goal is that the country designation is there to see uses that support residences in the area. And I can't think of a better fit than a church or a school to support residents in an area, not that is rurally set apart or that is, we're not out somewhere hidden in the county. We're at the intersection of two major arterials, Rimrock Road and Lancaster Road. And for that reason, that this type of use would have been, there would have been forethought given to this kind of use when that transportation network was planned. I would like to also mention that Goal 4 of the comp plan states that its purpose is to support the preservation of prime agricultural land, a premise that we don't disagree with. But this is not prime agricultural land. It's neither in production nor has it been receiving an ag exemption from the county. It's 10 acres, and 10 acres can hardly be classified as prime residential land. There'd be nothing you could really produce that could be viable that didn't serve yourself, but may serve anything on a larger basis.
Lay down.
Again, I'm going to stay just focused on the comp plan, and then I will be ready for rebuttal if need be. And I would just like to restate that this use is compatible with the country designation of the comp plan, and that its impacts can be mitigated through any conditions in the conditional use, with the conditional use permit. And also that we're stating again that no public agency has had an objection to this request, whether it's been for traffic or stormwater impacts, water, sewer, all of those agencies that had input at the first hearing all found this. Anything could be mitigated through the CUP process. So that winds up my testimony, and I turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Embry.
Thank you, and my name's Greg Embry. I'm an attorney at Witherspoon, Kelly, and Coeur d'Alene, and my office address is 608 Northwest Boulevard. And I appreciate the opportunity to offer comments this evening. I'd like to speak on in two categories. First, the federal Arlupa statute that this application creates some opportunities for analysis, and then a few thoughts on compatibilities. First, as to Arlupa, the federal Arlupa statute breaks down into 4 separate categories of claims. And these are briefly the substantial burden type claims, equal term claims, non-discrimination claims, and claims of unreasonable limits. The present conditional use permit application really focuses only on the substantial burden category of claims. And what those substantial burden claims are all about is a governmental entity such as Kootenai County, under the substantial burden part of Arlupa, is prohibited from applying land use regulations which impose a substantial burden on a party's religious exercise without a compelling governmental interest. So all of that really breaks apart into three elements. First, substantial burden; second, religious exercise; and 3, compelling governmental interest. So let's maybe talk about each one of those 3 briefly. As to the first part, substantial burden. And in this case, there is not just a substantial burden posed by recommended denial. There are multiple substantial burdens. In our written submission, we identified at least 8 different aspects, programs, offerings, physical attributes of the current site that are simply inadequate for what the church is trying to do. For example, seating capacity is inadequate. There is no place for a school. Storage capacity is inadequate. There are safety issues as to ingress, egress of people coming and going. ADA compliance, the elevator, meeting rooms, music rooms, and the Pathfinder Club. These are all programs or aspects of the current site that simply cannot move forward, cannot be offered, or simply inadequate, that would all be resolved at the new site. And so a denial in each one of these categories and more results in a substantial burden on religious exercise. Second part, is there a religious exercise? And this part is pretty straightforward. There really is nothing else going on here but for religious exercise. Each one of these identified inadequacies relate to the church's endeavors to exercise its religion. So all that's really happening at all is religious exercise. There's no commercial undertaking, nothing. So the remaining question is, does Kootenai County have a compelling governmental interest that justifies denying the application? And thus far, there has not been one identified. And examples of compelling governmental interests are matters of public safety, for example, say an avalanche zone, or an environmental matter, underground and a plume migrating underneath the property. Those are very severe public safety issues, but none of those are involved in this application. Granted, there have been some traffic concerns voiced, and while we're very respectful and we acknowledge the neighbors and surrounding area concerns about traffic, and I candidly share some of those in the area I live in, those are something different than a compelling governmental interest premised upon public safety. And it's interesting, there are in fact federal cases on the Arlupa statute that say neighboring concerns about traffic don't qualify as a governmental compelling interest. And so a denial of this conditional use permit application does work a substantial burden on the church's religious exercise without a competing compelling governmental interest with Kootenai County. We therefore are asking for it to be approved with conditions. Shifting gears to that part of the September 22nd, 2020 recommendation, it was the decision that 4 of the 7 required findings were met. The 3 that were not had to do with non-compliance with the comp plan, the neighboring area, and mitigation of impacts. And under each one of these these 3 required findings, the concern was traffic and noise. And we took that to heart, we took it seriously, and so we've done a traffic study. And I'd just like to point out a few numbers as to traffic and then talk about noise. As to traffic, the study revealed that the traffic will occur in basically 3 forms. There will be a Wednesday church service, which will generate 21 daily trips. That's once a week, only on Wednesday. Those 21 daily trips comprise 1/2 of 1% of the daily trips on Lancaster and Rimrock. In other words, it's a very small impact. Second, the Saturday church service will generate, and this is by far the greatest impact from the proposed site, will generate 163 trips. But again, put in context, that is only 4% of the daily trips on Lancaster and Rimrock. The other activity will be a school activity on 2 separate weekdays, which on each weekday, each of the 2 weekdays, will only generate 10 trips per day. Put in context, that is 1/4 of 1% of the daily trips. And it's worth noting, in the denial recommendation, it was set forth that there will be as many as 300 daily trips. But I'd like to underscore that if you take all of the activities on each day, Wednesday church service, Saturday church service, and the 2 weekday school activity days, that amounts to only 204 trips per week. So much less than the 300 perceived trips per day. So, and again, that type of a very modest traffic impact simply does not rise to the level of a compelling governmental safety interest. As to noise, certainly noise can be associated with traffic. I think we demonstrated that traffic impacts are less than minimal. And all but, for example, school activity recess, our activities will be inside. So there really should not be noise. So all that is to underscore the point that the application is compatible and that traffic and noise don't support an incompatibility conclusion with either the comp plan or the neighborhood. That point is also underscored by the fact that places of worship and schools are included as conditional uses in the agricultural zone. So these are contemplated as potential compatible uses. Perhaps the most compelling points we can make here as far as compatibility with the comp plan, the neighborhood, and the surrounding area is that there are at least 4 churches built in the permitted and built in the agricultural zone. The New Life Church is a over 30,000 square foot facility with 2 floors on 10 acres in the agricultural zone. It's there and it's not making undue impacts within its area. The Cornerstone Baptist Church is on a 9-acre parcel. Similar, the Heritage Baptist Church, similar. The Prairie Avenue Community Church is a 14-acre parcel. And one of the largest church facilities that was approved by the county commissioners in Kootenai County, but not built, was the Real Life Church on 116 acres, which that approval approved a church and a school. So the present application simply is compatible with not only the comp plan, but with the surrounding area as demonstrated by these existing constructed uses. So we therefore respectfully request that the application be recommended to be approved with conditions. Any remaining time we may have, we'd like to reserve for rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Okay, back to our, so I'll start over again just in case. David Morgan, in favor, may wish to speak.
Talk right into the microphone.
As was just mentioned.
Name and address for the record,
Yes.
please.
Raymond David Morgan. My address is 30755 North Caravelle Road in Athol, Idaho. Okay, I'd just like to briefly mention that I'm in favor, obviously.
David, you really have to be right on top of the microphone, or we're not picking you up.
Sure. I'm in
Yeah.
favor of the application, and I want to just point out that there have been in the past other churches that have been in the agricultural zone, as Mr. Embry mentioned, and even one of them, Real Life Ministries, actually has a commercial business associated with it, and it was approved by the county commissioners. Our application does not include that, and it has a very similar as far as religious use, worship center, and private school. I'd like to emphasize that our school is designated and focused on homeschooling parents and their families. So those that will be attending are part of the school process is required to be there to monitor their own children and be a part of it. So our program is designed so that parents actually participate with their children, monitor their children, and participate with them. It's also an agricultural program, and so in that sense, it actually is compatible, in my opinion, for the area, because we'll be teaching them organic gardening, all aspects of that, and other areas like music education and tutoring. So the school itself is not planned to be, not as existing in like a traditional school where parents will be coming and going, adding traffic in that sense, but they will be required to be there because our focus is the parents are being trained for homeschooling their own children. So they arrive, our school starts at 10 a.m., and they leave anywhere between 1 and 3, depending on how long they stay. And so it's, right now we have it at 1 day a week, and there's an additional day, a second day. And so the traffic is during the time when people are not going back and forth to work, typically in the morning and the evenings, when traffic you would expect to be greater than other times of the day. So I just like to point that out for clarification so that those that may not realize when they hear of a school, usually people think of school buses, traffic, a lot of traffic in the morning, a lot of traffic in the evening when school starts and when school ends. But this program is designed specifically to assist and train parents with homeschooling children. And many of them are, parents come with multiple children, so it's from various ages. In fact, 4 of the children that we have are mine, ranging from ages of 14 down to 6. So it helps families, it helps the community, and the program is meant to be a blessing, what we plan to do. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. And Brant Hay, once again, in favor, may wish to speak.
Hi, I'm Brant Hay. Address is 1869 East Celtis Way, Post Falls. I am the architect for this project. And I just wanted to mention just a couple things in clarification after reviewing some of the comments and clarify a couple potential misconceptions. The first one was adding on a little bit to what was said earlier about the comprehensive use. I think they pretty well stated how the zoning takes the comprehensive plan and further articulates and provides detail for that, and it does specifically identify various uses. And I would just like to point out it's not an accident or just kind of an afterthought that something like a school or a church would be an anticipated use that could be approved if certain steps were going through for this zone. And the very practical reason for that is uses that are compatible with residential areas when things are zoned. A criteria that's often considered is, where do those people drive? And what happens is when things get spread out farther, people have to drive further, and it increases the traffic problems for the overall area. Not necessarily on that specific street, but everybody has to drive farther to get to where they're going, and it just creates overall congestion incrementally for the entire area. So the more this kind of thing is pushed farther and farther away from a residential area anywhere in the county, the worse the overall traffic problem in the county is. So this is not just an oversight in a church trying to get a special exception. It's a very, it's been anticipated by the planners. And as was stated earlier, there are many examples. It might even be the typical case that churches and private schools are in residential areas. Obviously, every residential area is unique. They're not all the same. And so the key really becomes, since the zoning anticipates this, how is it done appropriately? And I would say, when I was tasked as the architect with this, one of my main goals was, I absolutely love the Hayden area in general. Even though I don't live there, I love driving down Lancaster, and it's beautiful. It's very different than the prairie. It's very different than south of the river. It's got its own character. And in my opinion, a building that goes there should not look like the things that are in other places necessarily. And so when we set it up, most typically churches and schools that are built these days, they're basically a big box, and they're very out of scale compared to even a large house or a shop or things like that. So couple of very specific things we wanted to do so that not only did this on paper comply, but also visually comply with the neighborhood. We set a module of how big an individual part of the building would be. So yes, if you look at the plan, it does add up to a large amount of square footage, and that's because it's not all in use at one time. When church is going on, people are not playing in the gym at the same time. If people are playing on the gym on Saturday night, they're not there. So it is a large space because it has different things used at different times of the week. But there's not a single part of the building that is anywhere near as large as some of those examples that were cited earlier. Some shops in the area might be up to 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. If this is 40,000 square feet, and you're looking at the equivalent of it is like 7 or 8 shops, but it's not like it's one big giant square massing building. It's broken down so that it can be detailed in character in a way that is consistent with residential construction, and that the scale is really broken down as much as we can. So I just wanted to point that out. There's been some suggestions that because of the size, that there's really an intent to use it more than has been stated, but that's definitely not the case. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Don Eckenroth, in favor, may wish to speak.
Not at this time.
Thank you. All right, I think that, wait a minute, I've got some more. Okay, we heard from Greg Embry, so that's, okay. Guy Maniscalco, in favor, does not wish to speak. Linda, whoops. Just give me a minute, make sure that I've got everybody in the right spot. Have they done their papers? Are they in favor? Because I don't have any more in favor. So because of our limitations on how many people can be in the room, we have some people out in the hallway. Okay. Do we have any people on Zoom who are in favor who wish to speak? If so, raise your hand through Zoom or unmute yourself and speak up.
Joey Grundon,
Go right ahead.
pardon me?
Go right ahead.
Name and address before you begin.
Joey Grundon, 3107 North 2nd Street, apartment 10, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 83815. And I'm in favor of the application.
Okay, do you want to add any reasons or justification for your being in favor, or just want to state that?
I'm a retired school teacher, and I believe strongly in the type of school that is being taught to the parents so that they can teach their children at home. I've heard various presentations by the coordinator, and I've talked with families who are very pleased with the results, and I've witnessed children who can read much better than public schools where I taught. And for all of those reasons, I believe strongly that it's a good fit for the area, that it will benefit all those residents, even the ones who in the first meeting were opposed. They will eventually, if it's approved, find out that it's a very big asset to their rural community. All across America, rural communities had churches and they had schools. And I think that that area needs churches and schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom in favor and wishing to speak? Doesn't look like it. I have no papers for anybody who's neutral in attendance personally. Are there any people on Zoom who are neutral and would like to be identified? Raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak. Okay, not hearing any or seeing any, we'll move on to those who are opposed. I have Mark Lord, who's opposed and wishes to speak.
Good evening. My name is Mark Lord. I'm at 12574 North Sunflower Loop in Hayden. I came tonight because I know that because of your previous judgment and your determination in the application that you recommended denial. So tonight it was supposed to be, I anticipated it to be mostly focused on RLUIPA. However, because of some of these comments that came in, I'm going to jump to some of those comments, and then I'd like to jump to the RLUIPA aspects of things. Some of which were that one of the things that the attorney that at Witherspoon Kelly had mentioned, he referred to Rimrock as a major arterial. Is that in fact the case, David?
Madam Hearing Examiner, that's actually a highway district controlled street. I'm not the authority on it.
Okay.
And I actually don't know.
Thank you.
I would highly disagree that that is a major arterial because it is far from it. And I wouldn't even consider Lancaster a major arterial, but I'd be proved wrong on that. Let's see, the uses that the attorney also identified as far as the comprehensive plan uses that are approved, or at least recommended. The one thing, again, that he neglected to mention is that all of those uses that were proposed to be within the comprehensive plan uses were based on a need for that community, which is that country community. That country community has not had a need for this. This is an outside influence, not an internal influence of that community. The other aspect, again, that the attorney mentioned as far as RLUIPA, yes, RLUIPA is meant to be a protective measure against bias and prejudice against religious institutions. The other aspect of RLUIPA is that it cannot be reverse discrimination. It has to be treated equally on both sides. And the way the attorney is treating this is that it is a one-sided issue, and it is not. The traffic impact report was prepared within the application. This is not the time for an attorney to take a private traffic study that is in conflict with that was presented in the report. The applicant's architect also identified the distance to drive for this location. Well, the fact of the matter is the distance for the congregation that is using the current facility that resides at Government Way in Lancaster is much closer to anyone who is going to that church, because the majority of the people that are in that congregation are not coming from our community, which that would intend to be served at its proposed location. In the homeschooling aspect, I would question that highly, because as an architect, I know that buildings are designed for a need. And you don't build a building if there isn't a need. In other words, the physical need to occupy the space that is being proposed, the 40,000 square feet. And if, Vlad, if you could pull up that site plan, and again, this is an issue that I raised a while back. The church is claiming that they are doing it, the first phase, which is the school and the multipurpose room. Along with that, the sanctuary would then be built. The fact of the matter is, this revised concept plan shows addition space. That dashed line exceeds the 40,000 square feet that is in the application. So what is it? They're not being truthful in what they're proposing to do in the future. Now, we've also retained an attorney, Post Falls Law, that prepared a brief that was submitted on the merits of RLUIPA in this case. Now, I could read a lot of the summary aspects within that. I know you have a copy of it, and I know David has a copy of that. So, and everything that our attorney looked at with respect to RLUIPA, this has no bearing in this case. The county has already approved the church in multiple locations within Kootenai County. They have demonstrated that there is no bias or prejudice to this church or any church. The other aspect is, if this project were for some reason to be approved based on RLUIPA, that approval then opens the floodgates, and it basically trumps the comprehensive plan that the county prepared, and it basically says, you have approved this based on RLUIPA. Therefore, any and all religious institutions can go into that area undeterred.
Okay, thank you. Ron Cockrell, opposed, wishes to speak.
I'm tempted to not speak just because I'm not as eloquent. And I have to agree with this fellow. We lived here almost 25 years. I live at 5152 East Lancaster. So we live right on Lancaster. Well, just right off Lancaster, but out past this building. And I must agree with this fellow that most people that are going to come to this church are not coming from our community. And the existing zoning that's there, I realize is not what they're trying to be there and coordinate in, but I don't see a real benefit for the local residents. They're all coming and they're coming into a commercial situation. We're virtually, I think we're circumventing some of the zoning that's prescribed. I mean, my neighbor has a hard time splitting into a 5-acre lot from a 10-acre because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but they really give them a hard time on that. And for this reason, I'm not a proponent of this land exchange that's happening. I see it's very self-serving to the landowner who owns it currently, or did own it. I don't know if it's changed hands. I'm sure if you were to follow the money, you'd see that down the road, he's getting something for that. I'm not sure exactly how that's all working out. But I have a hard time understanding that this is going to be a good thing for our community when all these people who are coming here couldn't just go to the existing site, and they can always remodel the site to whatever they need. And I too think further down the road, I think they're wanting to build, from what I understood, they also want to have some kind of a walk-in clinic, and that's going to bring a lot more people to this area. The traffic's tough enough as it is. They've widened the road. It's a 2-lane road, one each direction, which Rimrock is also. It's a little smaller. They haven't widened that road, but they're definitely not thoroughfares that are, I mean, everybody who lives east of the lake comes down Lancaster. Some may take Dodd, but they all merge into Lancaster, and everybody has to get up and down the road. And I can't tell, there's not one neighbor that I've talked to that lives out in the area that think this is a great idea, just simply because there's going to be so many more people out there trying to get on and off the road. I've got lots of notes here. I can't understand how they don't figure that Hayden Lake will be affected at all. There's going to be a lot of pavement, on this kind of a building. And the cars that are parked there, they have to drip oil. There has to be some contaminants that are going to leak into the lake. And the sewer situation, I understand the sewer problem's a bigger problem than what was just explained to us. I don't have a whole lot more to say. I really am not very eloquent, but I'm against.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Wendy Cockrell, opposed, wishes to speak.
Wendy Cockrell, my address is in 9.
Right on top of the mic.
Wendy Cockrell, my address is 5152 Lancaster. And before I start, I want to apologize for my terminology. Being a lay person, I don't quite understand the difference between non-residential, commercial zoning and the special permit that they're trying to get. To me, it's kind of a zoning change. I understand it's not quite that, but when you're putting up a 42,000 square foot building, to me, that's going to look and be a lot more commercial. I've lived there for over 20 years. We've had many homes and families move into our beautiful area. Growth and development has happened, but it's your responsibility as our Kootenai County Commissioners that it is done in a safe and prudent manner. I'm not against the Seventh-day Adventist Church in our community. They are already part of our community. They are less than 2 miles down the road in more of a commercial area located on Lancaster and Government. Why are they not willing to use their existing property to develop their schools and health clinic, etc., on the existing 10 acres that they already have in Hayden? They will lose the support of the community. As I hear, there was, over 1,000 on the petition? They will lose the support of the community by relocating and changing our area. They built their building, I would guess about 15 years ago, I'm not exactly sure, but brethren from the church I attend donated their time and talents in building to help them build their church. I don't think they will find that true this time around. It doesn't matter to me if it was a Seventh-day Adventist church or if it was an Albertsons. A 42,000 square foot building on Lancaster and Rimrock is a wrong location. That a 10-acre piece of property would be a huge structure, and your design is beautiful, but it'll be wall-to-wall asphalt. Traffic is probably the number one concern, but also the landscape for this non-residential is wrong. It's wrong for our community, it's wrong for the wildlife out there, and it's wrong for our lakes. Development is happening, growth is here, but let us be responsible with it. That 10-acre parcel needs to have a home on it and a family with 3 cars, not being changed to non-residential with 175 cars. It's up to the commissioners here. The responsibility is in your hands to decide how Kootenai County will grow. Be responsible and preserve our way of life here in North Idaho. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dean Hagginson, opposed, wishes to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm Dean Hagginson, and I live at 3133 East Lancaster Road, Hayden. Before my main comments, quickly want to touch on the earlier hearing because some things happened that surprised me. I felt that the development planner should confine their comments to the facts of the case rather than any judgment about approval. And the staff report mentioned that many comments were made in opposition, over 40 as I recall, but the planner basically just discounted them as they apparently alluded to a zone change. I guess I'm being redundant here. I think maybe you brought that up, and this was not a zone change. But those of us are concerned about the change of use, regardless of whether you're calling it zone change or conditional use. The Rimrock Lancaster intersection is already busy. The church proposes 2 new approaches, one each on Lancaster and Ramrock, close to the intersection. Church, school activities will adversely impact traffic. Now, the applicant minimizes that and tells us it's not a problem, but I think 2 new approaches near an already busy intersection are neither safe nor a wise solution. After mentioning the traffic, I'm going to mention light pollution, both from parking lot lighting and from automobiles parking and shining their lights in our east window across Rimrock from this site. As a close neighbor, we frequently experience very marginal water pressure from North Kootenai Water District and question the advisability of adding new demand without a serious upgrade. Our property is immediately west of the subject property. The soil in our area is very impervious clay. Runoff from this commercial institutional use very likely end up in Hayden Lake. Most importantly, we and many of our neighbors wish to preserve the integrity of the agricultural zone. That's why we live there. We're concerned this might be the first of future special use permits incompatible with the agricultural zone. The notion that it's an undue burden and hardship on the church to not get approved a special use permit has no credibility with me. I mean, there's countless available properly zoned sites in the Rafter and Prairie. So if the existing 10 acres is not the right place, there's other 10-acre spots that's not moving into an agricultural zone. So that's really the bottom line. Well, we believe that ag zone ought to be preserved. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Brian Chatfield? Opposed, wishes to speak. Oops, that wasn't Brian.
My name is Bryn Chatfield. I live at 12753 North Sunflower Loop, and I live just east of the proposed project, and I appreciate this process and your time. Thank you. I was born in a little mountain community called Paradise, California, and that town burned in 2018 in the Camp Fire. Paradise had a huge Adventist presence. I was born in an Adventist hospital. My children were born in the same hospital, delivered by Adventist doctors and nurses. Members of the Adventist community are my friends, my co-workers, and my employees. Their school and their church had great programs, and in all the years that I lived there, I participated in one. I was hired to choreograph their school musical. I mention this to show my love and admiration for the church and its parishioners, but also point out that generally the community at large does not use their programs. These programs, church meetings, and schools are attended by and benefit their members. In our escape from Paradise, we drove through fire. We experienced the effect of poor city planning. Years prior, the city council used funds contrary to the voice of the people to decrease the roads from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. This change proved to be deadly. I realize that Idaho favors owners, but I feel this CUP goes against every point in the comprehensive plan and 2020 updates. Passing this project under the guise of Arlupia will open the door to commercializing our country area. In my opinion, Lancaster Road is not equipped to funnel thousands of residents from around Lancaster area and around the lake in case of emergency. After losing everything, we decided to start over. The world was open to us, and we decided on beautiful Hayden, Idaho. Not Post Falls, not CDA, not even Hayden city limits. We chose a beautiful home in a rural area, a home surrounded by trees, wildlife, starry nights, mooing cows, and an area close to the lake, a neighborhood off the beaten path. The inconvenience of driving a few extra minutes was well worth the benefits of our rural area. We chose not to be in town surrounded by huge schools, traffic, buildings with parking lots, and overhead lights. I believe that a 42,000 square foot church and homeschool with parking lot, overhead lights on 24 hours a day in the middle of our country zoning is a blatant disregard for our community. Over 1,200 residents have signed the petition and encouraged the county to deny this project. Those attending the church will include those from Athol, Post Falls, CDA, and as stated in the last hearing, a few from Hayden, will get to enjoy the new church at a cost to the rest of our community. The homeschool will not help the kids in our community. It will help the kids from Athol, Post Falls, and CDA. I realize growth is inevitable, but it should be conscientious growth in accordance with a previously adopted plan, and in a manner, a plan that benefits those actually living in the area. Now this part I'm a little bit confused. In the last meeting, I asked how this CUP wouldn't open a can of worms for other CUPs to be used in the same area. In talking with Vlad, he said it was actually illegal to use a previous CUP, Real Life Ministries, to help validify this case. So I'm confused why that was even brought up. I'm also confused that if we are not supposed to, as according to Vlad, and I could be wrong because I don't get everything right, he said that the current location actually isn't supposed to be taken into consideration, that it's the location now. So how can their current location be considered a burden with our Lupia if we can't even take their current location into consideration? I hope that makes sense. So I'm asking you to deny this project. I really don't want them to pave my paradise and put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Heckendorf? Opposed, wishes to speak.
My name's Kevin Heckendorf. I live at 15972 North Silver Springs Road in Hayden, which is just kind of up the road and around the lake a little bit from the proposed building site. As during the last hearing, I'm here to voice my opposition to this proposal. After that hearing, I appreciated the analysis and recommendations given by the hearing examiner to deny the request for the conditional use permit. I was pleased at the in-depth nature of the recommendation and how it clearly displayed that this proposal does not fit the stipulations of the general plan. There are a few points that I would like to make. Some I made at the first meeting, but since we are at a repeat hearing, I may as well repeat the concerns. I also have comments that relate specifically to the desire to utilize the Arlupa legislation. Planning staff has now twice made the recommendation to allow the issuance of the conditional use permit, stating that this is not a zoning change. What still doesn't add up to me is how a multi-million-dollar commercial building project encompassing tens of thousands of square feet, outbuildings, and a couple hundred parking spaces can be viewed as conditional. There's nothing conditional or temporary about this proposal. The applicants state that the future size of church attendance and school structure will likely grow, as it should. However, this again presents us and the surrounding community with yet another concerning caveat and contingency. Second point is that the community opposition to this proposal has nothing to do with the merits of the applicants. I would venture to say that nearly all who oppose this proposal would be in full support of the applicants' endeavors elsewhere. It is commendable to homeschool the next generation. I'm doing that with my 7 children, and it is necessary to be grounded in the objective truth found in Scripture. The problem is the precedent that will be established. As the hearing examiner's report stated, there is no other similar use or improvement on any of the parcels in this area north of Lancaster. If this proposal is allowed, it will create a clear path for others to utilize. Those of us who did our due diligence and purchased properties based off location, land use, zoning restrictions, and CC&Rs will be at the mercy of whatever new entity wants to exploit a loophole that is now codified by tangible and visible precedent. This is a time of unprecedented growth in our community, as well as unprecedented uncertainty in our country. We must be able to be certain that our local agencies will do their part to preserve the integrity of the general plan and listen to the voice of the surrounding community members. I also wanted to consider the Arlupa legislation. I'm a follower of Christ, and this is my primary identity as a person. The constitutionally guaranteed free exercise of our right to worship and gather as we see fit has never been more under attack in our country than over this past year. Therefore, legislation that specifically prohibits discrimination against religious institutions is a welcome reminder of the truth that this country was built on. However, this Arlupa legislation in no way creates some sort of exception or lesser level of scrutiny for the proposal that we are discussing today. None of the opposition on the part of the community is due to the applicant's faith or religious purposes. As the September staff memo quotes from Arlupa, it says, Arlupa prohibits the implementation of a land use regulation in a manner that treats a religious institution on less than equal terms or that discriminates against any assembly on the basis of religion. As noted previously, the community opposition is not out of ill will or desire for discrimination towards or against the applicant. It is a matter of the precedent that this exception would establish for our area. Personally, I must admit that I do find a possible inconsistency in the applicant's presentation. During these hearings, the applicant has stated that a goal of this new facility is to be a blessing to the adjacent neighbors. However, after hearing the overwhelming concerns and reasons for the opposition, it is clearly evident that the community does not feel blessed by the determination to make this sweeping change to the landscape. Years back, I was part of a church in another state, and my wife happened to be on the staff at the time of a proposed building project that was extremely similar to this one. After the public hearing, where significant opposition had been expressed by the community, the lead pastor notified my wife and the rest of the staff that no matter what the county ultimately decided, the church would not seek to continue with the project. The church had decided that in this case, the best way to love their neighbors was to actually listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Moss, opposed, wishes to speak.
Good evening, hearing officer. Thank you for this opportunity.
Name and address, please.
Brian Moss, 12695 North Pebble Creek Drive in Hayden. I'm just going to be reiterating what was already stated, really. Just a little bit of background. My background's in land use. I spent my entire career in land use planning, and associated. So this is where my background is when I speak. I think no one, first of all, is questioning the mission of the church, but rather the proposed area. That's very clear. I too come from an area, not unlike Paradise, Sonora, California, where Seventh-day Adventists have a very, very strong presence, wonderful community members. I've done a wonderful job there, which is one of the reasons I'm questioning why they're kind of pushing an inconsistency here. But with that said, again, not against the church in any way. Certainly in favor of Seventh-day Adventists, just not necessarily in this corridor. I want to note that, as stated before, it appears that the people that are in favor of this project are not residents in the immediate area, so it is not impacting them. The CUP, most importantly for me, opens the door. If it's approved, it opens the door for similar development in a residential agricultural corridor. And that's my primary concern. It's not even so much this proposal and this project, but once this is approved, now the door is open for other projects. I'd also like to state that I was a little unclear as to why Real Life, which is off of Highway State 41, is being compared to Lancaster and Rimrock. I don't understand. I don't understand that, especially as it comes to traffic and impacts. RLUIPA, I just want to second the comments made by Mr. Mark Lord. Just absolutely spot on. Other than that, I would just encourage the county to consider responsible growth. We already have, I want to say it's 4,000 homes going in at government in Lancaster. That already is going to be an impact. I understand the church going, we don't want to have an issue with that kind of impact, but by moving, they're bringing an impact to the residential agriculture community. So those are my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mindy Bomer, opposed, wishes to speak.
Good evening. I'm Mindy Bomer, 3239 East Cambridge Drive in Hayden. I'm here on behalf of myself, my husband Brandon, and my good neighbor Lisa Sharp, who was unable to attend tonight. I was present at the previous hearing in September, and I'm still opposed to this project, as most everyone else here is as well. I want to basically say that everyone who has spoken so far this evening, I'm in total agreement as far as the opposition. There are many, many, many concerns that address the community, and nothing against the Seventh Adventists, but this proposal is for that religious party's benefit, not the general community. The issue being compared to the Real Life Church in Post Falls, I can see personally some huge differences as far as the offerings that are given to the community or opportunities, as far as sports opportunities, as well as their educational school there. Whereas I feel that this project would only be open to a small number of individuals within the area. I won't take up any more time because I'm just in opposition, and I just wanted to speak my piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul Lawson, opposed, wishes to speak, may wish to speak.
Good evening. Examiner Woodward, thank you for the time. Paul Lawson, 15011 North Boot Hill Road, and very close to the proposed site.
Stay close to the mic.
Okay.
You're tall.
Okay, there we go. All right, thank you. All right, cool. I think we've shown tonight, and this is your job with the county, that it's forest for the trees. You know, the objective of the county commissioners is to be their elected stewards of we the people, the residents of Kootenai County, not out-of-state corporations. And I think our voice is very loud here. And we're in unison on that. The only two people that have stood up here tonight have financial commercial interests in their job to be here tonight. They're not residents, they're not here. The only people that chimed in don't live within a 10-mile radius of the building site. So, you know, with them being down where they're at currently, that's great. They're welcome in our community. So the Arlupia statue is dishonest on its face. This doesn't belong here. The true burden on the people are the infrastructure, is the commercial building, and it's all of that. I mean, I don't need to just rehash and take up all of our time. To call even Lancaster a thoroughfare, they bring up these other church facilities that have been built. Those are on major arterial roads that in not our small rural community. So I appreciate your prior review very much. I appreciate your review this time. And I think everybody needs to ask the county commissioners in aggregate, you swore to be the stewards of residents of Kootenai County. It's in your mission statement. I've seen the swearing in ceremonies. Are you looking at the interest of out-of-state corporations? Or are you looking at the interest of Kootenai County residents, especially the directly impacted community of this? And also, too, that's been mentioned tonight, if this was to be approved, that would be a terrible precedent in this county and border to border for that. So thank you very much for your time tonight, Ms. Woodward. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Annette Calesta, opposed, may wish to speak. Do I have?
I'm going to give it to my mom.
Do I have a slip on mom? Yes?
Yes.
And your name?
It's Linda Calasa.
Oh, okay, got it. And your address, please?
It's 3496 East Lancaster Road in Hayden. Okay. My attorney, he went through this extensively, and he said that this does not apply. I don't know why he's not here, but he's not. And
I'm participating by Zoom, Linda.
Oh, there you are, Jonathan. Hello. Why aren't you saying something?
We haven't gotten
We
here
haven't
yet,
gotten there
evidently.
yet.
Oh, good. We're not doing Zoom yet. Okay. Their current location at the corner of Lancaster and Government Way was a long time ago in the county, and no one complained when they put that church and that school in. And so this is not an issue of discrimination. It's not been an issue then. It is not an issue now. The problem is that their complex is totally incompatible with the area. We've heard about the traffic. It is already ridiculous. I live right directly across the street. I have to see this. And the lady that sat down, she mentioned today that she tried to get across the street with her daughters and couldn't. I mean, it just took forever. I'm going to address the size. We toss around numbers. I'm a teacher. And what does a million really look like? Their building is to be 40,000 square feet. What does that really look like? I called the county to find out something that we could compare and identify with. The Safeway on Niter Road is 54,000 square feet. The Albertsons on Prairie is 51,000 square feet. The commercial buildings between 95 and the airport are generally 7,000 to 8,000 square feet. So they are proposing to build 5 to 6 commercial-sized buildings in an area of single-family homes in the country with cows next door. I won't be able to sell my house for top dollar. I'll be lucky if I sell my house, if I ever wanted to sell it, because of what's going to look out on. My neighbors will also be adversely affected in a variety of ways. This is in direct violation of C, D, and G of the county code, and their current June 18th, 2020 plan is positioned so that the parking is all along Rimrock and Lancaster. There are 213 parking spaces, I counted them. This means they are expecting 639 people to use the facility if there are only 3 people per car. Target has 310 parking spots, and that goes all the way down to the bank. How often is this complex going to be used? Right now, the complex down on Government Way is being used on Saturday, but also on Sunday, the parking lot's full. So I don't know who's using that, whether they've given it to another congregation or what. And this is not to mention all the things that they are planning for the rest of the week. And don't forget the youth rallies. Can you imagine the traffic, the car lights pointing onto Rimrock and Lancaster, the noise of horns and doors slamming, and the beep, beep, beep when the keys are being clicked? This is a commercial operation, and it's going to be going 7 days a week from 6 o'clock in the morning to 11 p.m. I mean, how do we discriminate when they're going to come and when they're not going to come? There are no overhead lights on this plan that they have submitted. There is a 25-foot setback to the parking area. This property is on a rise, and so when I open my front door, I am going to be looking up at a commercial-sized building and a flood of lights all along Lancaster. This violates the Kootenai County Planning Code C, D, and G again. When this commercial complex was first designed, the comprehensive plan had not been tampered with. Those higher restrictions should apply to the current project. There is no other structure this size with this traffic after you leave Government Way. We live in the country with no street lights. Houses are on large pieces of land. Our lifestyle, the feel of the area will be forever changed. This violates C, D, and G of the Kootenai County Planning Codes. I also find it very frustrating that this neighborhood is going to be totally affected by people who don't even live in the area. They are coming from Athol and Rathdrum and Coeur d'Alene and from neighboring areas. How dare they come in and completely change another area because they want their church there? It says also that he was saying that in the future, in 5 years, they're looking to have 100 children and 300 parishioners, which is not what they are saying now. This is my daughter's time. And they're I'm all scrambling around here. Their attorney, whoever he was, she was saying that, you know, what they're looking at is, as I see Kansas, okay, you have a wide open area. It's a good thing to put a church and a school in one place, and people can come to that. This is not the case. They've already got a facility down at the bottom of the hill. They do not need to have to come up an additional 2 miles to a brand new facility. This is impacting all kinds of people up and down the road, where down below they are already, it's an easy in, easy out. They're complaining because it's going to cost them a lot of money. Well, that's too bad. They designed it, fix it. And then she also said that the county supports people in the area. This is not for the area, people in this particular area. It's for people from out of the area coming in using our lifestyle. And our Lupa guy said that the noise doesn't apply. Well, good luck. I mean, I don't want to live across the street from this. And the traffic, he doesn't live there. He doesn't know what it's like every single day with all the construction vehicles, the contractors, the trusses going down, the gravel trucks, all this other nonsense. It's nonstop from early in the morning until late at night. And he's just going, this facility is just going to add to it. And we want to stress, this has nothing to do with the fact that it's a religious institution. It's the fact that this thing does not apply to this particular area. And they're trying to bulldoze their way in using all these little stipulations. And you can have one attorney that looks at something, and you have another attorney, and he looks at it completely different. And it's the same wordage, it's the same verbiage, it's the same everything, it's just the way you want to look at it. And the bottom line is they already have a facility. If they don't like it, go to the prairie or go someplace else. There's other places that are available where people are not going to want them not to be. We have said there's 1,000 people that have signed an affidavit that said, we don't want you here. Listen to what the neighborhood is saying. We don't care that you're a church or a school. We don't want your facility where it's going to be put. he went on, I can't even read my own writing. It's a burden. The seating is I didn't design the seating. There's no school. Well, go ahead and fix the school. There's a safety in and out. Well, you think he's going to have a problem there? You've got an easy in and out there. You're going to have 3 exits on busy roads in the new site. The current site is inadequate. Well, why? Go fix it. You've got 10 acres. Grow. Nothing else is going on. Exercising religious, I can't even read it. Compelling. Anyway, all of his 4 things that he brought up is swayed to persuade people to look at their side of the equation. And it is, again, a swayed view. This is absolutely not compatible with this area. And I appreciate your time, and I thank you.
Thank you.
And I also really appreciate the fact that you said that this didn't apply the last time, and I hope you find that it doesn't apply this time.
Mark Harris, opposed, wishes to speak.
Good evening. My name is Mark Harris. My family and I live at 12736 North Rimrock Road, right across the street to the south of this proposed project. First, I'd like to thank you for sacrificing your time here to hear our concerns. If you would, I'd like you to indulge me for a minute and look at things from my perspective, even though it may seem self-centered. Back in 1990, our family and I started looking for a place to raise our children, and we did a lot of research for 7 years, looking at almost every state, and we looked into taxes and crime and cost of living, you name it, and where we settled was in our spot right across the street. The original owner we talked to, he was out in his tractor one day and we were talking to him, and he said, yeah, I've been offered millions of dollars for this place to build a golf course even. And I could live with a golf course because then it would look nice and fit the surrounding area. And he said, I'll never sell. Well, he must have passed away, and over the generations or whatever, it now has been in these people's hands. But what I'd like you to think about is you found this oasis, and we had my daughter married 2 years ago in our backyard because when she tried to find a facility, there was nothing she found that was as pretty as our area. And we had a great wedding. And imagine yourself living in a place like that, and all of a sudden there's going to be lights from parking lots, lights from the buildings. Go by a high school next time and see how tall those gymnasiums are. And you've got those overlooking your backyard. You've got traffic. I don't care what the gentleman on the screen said. You can do all the studies you want, but I've seen it go from a gravel road, 1 lane, to hardly seeing a car, to 2-lane paved road, to now basically a center divider in that, and there is now a constant flow of traffic. And I understand that's progress and it's going to happen, but that's a big difference from people living in the area coming through versus on a corner like that at an intersection. So I disagree with his studies. You can do all the studies you want. Another thing, I know there's a lot of things that have been brought up, and I don't want to hash them over again, but besides what I mentioned, imagine, like I said, with the lights on the buildings and the parking lot, and then if, God forbid, they put one of those Las Vegas neon sign lights like they have down on Government where there's existing places, imagine that coming through your window every night. And I have a neighbor to the left of me. I'm not going to get into it because of HIPAA laws, but she's basically housebound, and she told me the only enjoyment she has is being able to look out that direction and see the mountains and the scenery. And now that's going to be taken away from her. If it was houses or a tract of homes, she said I could live with that because I could still see the mountains over that, but not this big giant gymnasiums type buildings. And then as far as, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, I don't know about all this RLUIPA stuff, but I can tell you one thing. I've just retired a couple years ago. I've been a LA City firefighter engineer for 40 years. And I have seen LA City destroyed by situations like this. And I'll give you an example. Skid Row is terrible right now, but it's compacted in an area because it's in a commercial area. It's not out in the residence. If you get on YouTube and look up things like Venice Beach or South Central LA, where I've worked, and Venice and all these other areas, they are destroyed right now. I have seen beautiful neighborhoods that have caused the people to move out and leave, and then lower income people coming, and it's just destroyed with homeless and everything, because the reason why is the city let them go into these neighborhoods and offer services for drug rehab, alcohol rehab, and I've talked to a couple of their church members, and that's what they plan on doing. So what happens is these people that want these services end up staying close by. That's why you have these tent cities and homeless population problems, is because they can't come in from long distances to get to these facilities, and it's just wrecked neighborhoods. And I just hate to see our area go, not that it would be that bad, because it's weather is going to cause a difference, but thanks for your time.
Thank you. Jim Chiabata, opposed, wishes to speak? How badly did I mangle that?
Shabatoni, but that's not too bad for the way that goes. I live at the...
Part of it's your penmanship.
That's true. I got a D in handwriting. I live at 15304 North Shenandoah, down the street from the proposed site. Bear with me, a bit repetitive. Hopefully some entertainment in there. But anyway, I've lived in 11 states in Europe. Between the military and the airlines, I'm visiting tons of countries. Idaho is special. 5 years ago, I decided to retire here. Why? For two reasons. The land, it's beautiful, goes without saying, okay? The people, they're special. Of all the places I've visited, I've decided to come here. Why are they special? Let me give a quick story. I'm heading on 97, Idaho 97, probably following too close to the car in front of me, okay? He pulls off on the side, and I go, uh-oh, what's he going to do? Whip me the bird? Is he going to flash a gun, yell at me, curse? I pass by, and what does he do? He smiles and waves. After this happens 2 or 3 times on the weekend, I figured out two things. I'm following too close, and Idaho people are different. They're courteous, and they think of other people. So when I discovered that, it happened time and time again, and that's why we're here. We're thinking of other people. We're thinking of the lady living across the street from this proposed site. We're thinking about the neighbors. You've heard a lot from them today, weddings and kids. We're thinking about the ranchers and the farmers, because it's agricultural. We're thinking about the people who access Hayden Lake via Lancaster. We're thinking about the environmental impact on the Hayden watershed. We're thinking about the wildlife, the deer, the turkey, the elk. Why would you put an institutional building on the edge of a national forest? I don't know. And we're thinking about precedent. This came up numerous times tonight. I mean, my church in downtown Coeur d'Alene would like to swap their expensive commercial property for cheaper property out here. Why not? In 10 years, Lancaster could be the new Bible Belt. Now, I have nothing against the Bible. I'm a practicing Christian. I have nothing against the Adventists. In fact, I attended their seminar on prophecy. It was a great experience for me. They gave me a Bible. They gave me a concordance. They're good, respectful people. They were kind and courteous to me and expected nothing in return. I like the concept of their school and homeschool. I like this very much. However, because I like something or have a friend, I don't expect the rules to change for them, nor my friends. I was hoping that the request would be withdrawn after the first hearing because it went so badly in that direction. For peace and harmony in the community, I think our community, now that I'm a member for a few years, would like their worship to grow and their church to grow, just not to grow in our backyard. There were alternatives available, renovating the current property or to find another piece of property that's properly zoned, asking them to sacrifice their will for the will of the community, not to fight the community. As far as our loop is concerned, I'm not a lawyer. but I can tell you that a congregation of 300 people worshiping is not the same as a gas station or a convenience store. I can also say that the substantial burden is a substantial burden. Before, at the first hearing, it seemed like they were balancing renovating versus buying new. I think the quote went from the Adventist was that it's nearly as costly to build a new church as to renovate. That means it's even cheaper to renovate. So they were looking at it. Now that lawyers are involved, it seems like that's no longer feasible. But I think the community's will is not against them, but to have them choose a different method. The 4 other churches mentioned, well, we don't know when those occurred or what the comp plan was there. Our Lupa was new in 2000. Maybe it was before that. Anyway, details to be worked out. In any event, what I do know about our Lupa is that the results are mixed and that they are state dependent. Different states have different verdicts. And this is not Colorado. You are the leader. You are our representatives. This is your community. These are your people, along with 1,240 petitioners. We pray and hope that you have the courage and the energy to represent us. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Elsa Ousley, opposed, and it doesn't say whether you wish to speak or not. Okay, is Daniel Ousley? Okay, and are you yielding your time to him, or are we adding time? Okay. So, Daniel?
Daniel Ousley, 37593 East Hayden Lake Road in Hayden, Idaho. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I have a few brief comments. I do want to talk a little bit about the RLUPA claim, and I think I'm not a lawyer, but this claim seems rather problematic to me. I'm a big fan of actions speak louder than words. And when you look back at this community and the types of projects that this community has voiced opposition to, what you'll see is that this community has consistently voiced opposition to projects, maybe not exactly the same as this, but projects that would have similar impacts on the rural area. I can name 2 that I know personally I've been directly involved in the opposition to. One was the, 155 homes on the corner of Lancaster and East Hayden Lake Road. Traffic was a major issue. There were a lot of different concerns with lighting and traffic and things like that. The Mountain Air Resort, another one that the community was very much opposed to. And again, it's all the same reasons, whether it's traffic, whether it's impact to the community, whether it's not in line with the overall designation of the community. So this is a very consistent response from the community. So it really gives you an idea, an understanding of this is not discrimination based off of a church. This is a consistent pattern of response from this community. And it's very important to note that. A couple of other things that I think are really important to note. When we look at the traffic impact from this site, traffic impact is not just limited to a study area. Traffic does not exist in a bubble. When we look at things like this, so think about it from this perspective. The church is going in, and yes, you can argue back and forth whether it's 300 trips a day or whether it's 275 or 225 or whatever the number is. All of this adds up. All of this stacks up on Lancaster Road. Lancaster Road, for those of you who live there, and I live right down the street from Lancaster Road. In fact, the only way, pretty much the main way I can get to my house is down Lancaster Road. We have major developments coming into this area, into Lancaster Road. We have Hayden Canyon, which is supposed to add roughly 1,800 homes. I know of at least one other and possibly 2 other developments on Lancaster that will add an additional 100 to 150 homes each. I believe these are both have been both annexed by the city of Hayden and taken out of control of the county. So when we look at church adding to this, adding to the traffic, it really adds up. All of it adds up in terms of the traffic. All of it adds up in terms of what the impact to the area is. And so it's not just simply the church. You can't look at it in a bubble. You have to look at it in terms of the overall impact to the entire area. A couple things that I really was thinking about when we talked about 10-acre parcel, and we talked about the kind of the size of the total size of the building. 10 acres, so how big is an acre? An acre is what, roughly 45,000 square feet? So 40,000 square feet of buildings is roughly an acre. Can you imagine any agricultural parcel that has roughly an acre's worth of buildings? Does that really fit with the area that we're talking about? And really those are the comments that I had. I just want to thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Stephen Woody, opposed, may wish to speak. Okay, thank you. David Stetzelberger, opposed, may wish to speak. Thank you. Tobias Bateson, opposed, may wish to speak. Thank you. Tommy Bateson, opposed, may wish to speak. Tammy. Sorry.
Tammy Bateson, 3125 East Lancaster. I am a stone's throw from this development, so this is obviously very personal to me. I am not against the church. I think they're wonderful people, but I have an issue with some of the comments that were made earlier by the gentleman on the computer, or a couple of people. One of them was that it is not true viable agricultural land, so therefore its agricultural designation therefore doesn't really matter. And that the ability for the church to grow is so limited that it's a substantial burden for them, and so therefore they need to go. And I think some of these people have already alluded to that as well. I think the issue too is that I think that they have every ability to grow, and I think that's great. But again, not taking into account that the actual substantial burden, maybe not from a legally standpoint, but from what we're dealing with here from reality, will be on the community, not on the church. They have a financial burden. I understand that. That's their financial burden to bear, not ours. I am right there. I would be dealing with every possible negative outcome, and I really don't think that the facility can outweigh its pros and cons and say that what they do benefit the community, which again, even some of the people who got up here to speak are not in the community, would outweigh the negatives. That's not possible. And they're not offering anything that would truly be a blessing, because they're taking away from every aspect of our life. We are there for a reason. We are there to be away from cars. We are there to be away from lights. We are there to be away from noise. We are there to be away from light pollution. And that Vegas sign out there, when you drive out Lancaster at night, you can see it from 95. That would be awful. The lights from cars, we can get that already in our house. It's ridiculous. It already happens in the middle of the night into our bedroom. I don't need that now 24/7 because they want to build there. They have so many other opportunities and so many other options and places where they can build, places where they can grow, and equating themselves to real life. Real life is in an industrial area. They're not in the smack middle of a neighborhood. So of course that one is okay. The conditional use permit does not correlate to this area, and whether it's a legal issue or not, I think that's another viable point. But it's apples and oranges. Real life to this facility is not the same thing. It's not the same place. And we live there. That is our life. It would be our sacrifice, our burden to bear. Many of us can't move any other place. The church has the ability. They can. They have the freedom. We don't. We are limited in certain ways. Right now, the world's their oyster. There is no reason for them to pick this spot over so many other options. Maybe it's a financial issue and this was granted to them. I don't know. But I know that there's probably other people, organizations, even maybe a community effort that could be raised to help them find a viable piece of land somewhere that absolutely would not 100% negatively impact the surrounding area. I think we checked on the way here, it's well over 1,250 have signed that petition. It's growing. The surrounding area does not want them, not because of anything except that they know that this type of development is wrong. The right type of development, homes, 1 acre, 5 acre, whatever, fine. This type of development is not meant for this area. It can be on the prairie, it can be on West Lancaster. There's so much land out there, it's growing, and they could have so many more opportunities to impact that area and draw to them. I would like to be able to get out of my driveway whenever I want to get out of my driveway. This development would prohibit that, and for that reason, I am opposed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kevin Radigan, opposed, may wish to speak.
I am Kevin Radigan. I live at 37137 East Hayden Lake Road. I'm a builder, a small-time developer, spent over 40 years in construction, and currently I'm a professor at Eastern Washington University. I teach construction management and engineering classes. In all the time that I've been in construction, I've never once applied for a zone change or applied for a conditional use permit. Partly because I didn't want to go through this, but partly because I believe that that philosophy of my building a home or a little residential subdivision or a medical office building within the zoning that already existed automatically showed my respect for the community in which I wish to build. As far as RLUPA, RLUPA, whatever it's called is concerned, I find that insulting to the community and tacitly threatening to the county commissioners. No one wants to deny this application based on religion. Any large structure or any large layout of small structures, whether commercial, religious, industrial, or even residential that's not compatible with this area, would be and has been opposed. Mr. Callahan used the words compatible with the neighborhood. The applicant's own representative used the terms compatible with rural residential. Let's be clear, this is not the one-room schoolhouse with a church bell between farmhouses. This is a 40,000 plus square foot structure that will grow in the future. The community, the people of this community are overwhelmingly opposed because they believe it is not compatible with where they live. The attorneys said they tried to find a compelling government interest. Well, this is the compelling government interest. It's in keeping this area under the 5-acre residential or agricultural use zone to maintain the character and the very nature of the community in which we live. These are the decisions that you have to make. The comprehensive plan says that CUPs may be approved, not must be approved. It's your decision. Make it a good one.
Thank you. Linda Radigan, opposed, does not wish to speak. Donald Deere, opposed, does not wish to speak. That's all that I have, unless there's someone out in the hall that hasn't been able to get in, which I don't think is the case, but just check. And then we'll move to Zoom. No? Okay. So those of you on Zoom who wish to speak, raise your hand either through Zoom, raise your hand, and if you can't find the hand raise, unmute yourself and identify yourself, please.
I'd like to speak.
Fine. Name and address and go for it.
Leslie Wild, 12057 North Rimrock. My husband and I have lived in Idaho for 51 years. I'm a retired school teacher. We chose our home here on Rimrock. It's our investment, it's our retirement place, and we chose it because of the country living, the rural living style. I'm opposed to this development, not based on, I would be opposed to it if it was, it's not based on church development, it would be the same opposition to if it was secular. We feel that the church owns the property on the corner of Lancaster and Government Way, and it's my understanding that they also have the school in Coeur d'Alene and a thrift store, a food store on Government Way. And if in the future these activities are consolidated and relocated to this new the area, the proposed area, the impact would be considerable. And we believe the church, in the testimony that they've given in the hearings, has misrepresented the immediate impact the church would have. I know, for example, that for several years, at least 2018 and 2019 and 2020, we received mass mailing brochures from the church advertising 12-day free seminars offered every evening at the current church location on Government Way in Lancaster. And this year, the seminar ran from October 9th to the 24th. And we feel this is an example of 7-day-a-week traffic that would directly impact our area in the evening. The cities of Hayden and Hayden Lake, I think they need to do an impact study for traffic. I understand that I think it was Sandra Young spoke about Rimrock Road. Well, that's a safety factor. Rimrock Road is a 2-lane road without shoulders. Bicyclists and pedestrians if traffic increases, it would really be a safety factor. And the other roads that the access roads would be Hayden Avenue, I'm trying to think, Strayhorn, Lakeview. They're all narrow roads that would be directly impacted. So I think the cities of Hayden and Hayden Lake and Dalton Gardens and East Coeur d'Alene need to do impact studies for traffic. This large-scale development of the school, church, learning facilities just isn't appropriate for our rural area. And I understand our LUPA legislation, but I don't believe the Seventh-day Adventist Church would be discriminated upon or suffer unduly burdensome land use restriction if they're denied this. The impacted neighborhoods would have. I think the church has several options besides requesting a zoning change that would impact us. It could sell the donated acreage that they're talking about and use the money to relocate to another property already appropriately zoned for their use. They could sell this acreage and use the funds to expand at their current location on Government Way in Lancaster. And we appreciate the opportunity to have input in something that would basically affect our lives and our investment in our retirement. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next Zoom-based speaker.
Madam Hearing Examiner, my name is Jonathan France. I'm an attorney with Post Falls Law. My address is 806 East Polston Avenue, Suite B. And I represent a local citizen action group that opposes this CUP application. I'm going to limit my comments to our LUPA because I think that's really what we're trying to focus on and address at this time. I'd like to begin by pointing out that with our LUPA, there's two different bases on which a land use regulation can be voided by our LUPA. The first is if it's referred to as the equal terms portion. It's if they are imposing unequal terms on a religious organization. From what I heard at the beginning of the presentation in favor of the project, there is no argument that the current requirements impose an unequal burden on a religious group, particularly you have a think that that is conceded, and so I'm not going to dwell on that aspect of our LUPA. The second, which has garnered some more conversation here, is whether or not there's a substantial burden that's being placed on the church for this application. I would first like to point out that we don't need to find that there's a compelling government interest unless the land use regulation imposes a substantial burden. So we don't even need to get and talk about whether the government has a compelling interest in this process if there's no substantial burden. And I think that's really important because according to Ninth Circuit law, there is no substantial burden that is being placed on there. And I would like to discuss why here briefly. Going back to some of the earlier comments, some of the reasons that were stated as to why there's a substantial burden, the ones that I noted that were presented earlier was there was not enough seating capacity, there's no ADA compliance, there's something about an elevator and meeting rooms that were too small, and really this concept that they've grown. And the reason why I don't think that those are very valid arguments under the Arlupa statute is because we have a party here that already has a 10-acre site that, and I know this has been mentioned, but they've got a 10-acre site in existence on the corner of Government Way and Lancaster presently. I have not heard or seen any reasons or anything that would prohibit them from expanding that site. There are no regulations that I'm aware of that would prevent them from going in and remodeling, and indeed, at the last hearing for this matter, I think that was discussed that they were contemplating whether they should remodel to accommodate their growth or they should go to build new. So I think there's this implicit concession that they're just fine on their 10 acres. They can build what they need to build. And so what we're really looking at isn't, hey, if they don't get this 10 acres, if they don't get this CUP, they can't practice their religion. That's not what we're looking at. And that is exactly what Arlupa is focused on. They have the ability to practice their religion. They have the ability to expand their current site. They have the ability to add the school there. It's the exact same site. It's less than 2 miles away, and there's nothing that's prohibiting them from expanding that site and continue to practice their religion as they see fit. And that's really important. I hope you were able to take note of my November 5th letter that I sent, where I did go through and break down some of the case law. I think it's important to really focus on that case law because as you go through it, it becomes clear that the substantial burden is whether or not a religious organization can find land available to practice. Some of the cases that I saw that I highlighted in that brief for you included an example where there was a religious organization that wanted to come in and build a meeting house, and there was literally no land in that jurisdiction upon which a church could be added. And in that situation, the Ninth Circuit came down and said, hey, you guys, there's nowhere else they can practice. Okay, your land use restrictions are a little too tight. You need to loosen them up. And our LUPA applied to void some of the issues that they had there. Consequently, I think it's really important, if I can just quote a little part from a case, this is San Jose, which case is this? This is San Jose Christian College case that I cited in my brief, and while talking about some of the land use provisions that prevented a religious organization in Chicago from selecting a particular location, the Ninth Circuit cited and said, while they, meaning the land use regulations, while they may contribute to the ordinary difficulties associated with location, they do not render impracticable the use of real property in Chicago for religious exercise, much less discourage churches from locating or attempting to locate in Chicago. You know, the real focus, as I stated, the real focus is on whether or not they have the ability to practice. They've got 10 acres, and it's literally right down the street. They have the ability to practice. There's no evidence that's been produced or submitted that I'm aware of that indicates that they cannot, that they are prohibited from using the current 10 acres they have.
Jonathan, your 5-minute timer went off.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear any any timer. If I can have just 30 more seconds.
Go.
Thank you. The last thing I'd like to point out is the example with Real Life Church. I was born and raised here. I know the area quite well. Where Real Life was built, within a half a mile of Real Life, there's a Ziggy's Home Improvement building. There's a carpet store. It's now a builder's first source, but it hasn't always been that. But there's a couple of very large storage facilities, self-storage facilities. You know, the difference is that we have from that application to this application where within a 2-mile radius, the largest building is a 10,000 square foot barn that is set far back on very large acreage, farther down the street that's owned privately. It's just a very different aspect here. And to go back to what Mr. Callahan said at the beginning when he was talking about conditional use, he said a conditional use is use which may be used in a manner consistent with the neighborhood. This is not a manner consistent with the neighborhood. There's no violation of our LUPA because they have the ability to practice their religion. And looking at things like Real Life Church, which is almost kitty corner from Post Falls High School, which is already a very large building, I just don't think is relevant. And so with that, Madam, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who else is on Zoom that wishes?
Yes, I'm Jeff Harvey. My name is Jeff Harvey, and I am at 5925 East Hayden Lake Road. I'm the president of and speaking for the Hayden Lake Watershed Association. The association does not oppose development, but does not strongly support or strongly supports wise, balanced development. The association has over the years had a productive relationship with Camp Myveden, the Seventh-day Adventist facility on Hayden Lake's Mocken Bay. We do not believe the church should be in any way discriminated against by the government, but neither should it receive any special treatment not afforded any other party. The association opposes the issuance of this CUP from in this designated zoning area sought by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The county planning for this area is country or agricultural and rural residential. Many landowners bought into this area, and you heard many of them tonight, for the rural setting. And for the county to now permit a commercial use betrays those landowners who sought out and bought into this rural residential setting. The church proposes use of the land is not, proposed use of the land is not compatible with the existing zoning. Should this variance be granted, how can we ever expect the next one will not be granted or the next one denied? It's basically going to start the change of this entire area. The church would additionally require centralized sewer service to be brought across Lancaster Road. This will open the entire area of Lancaster Road to an incompatible development.
Who's the zoning meeting is this?
The church, the association does not believe the sewer district should expand beyond its boundaries, and this area is beyond its boundaries. We have also raised the issue with the sewer district. The association certainly opposes sewer service to the proposed facility because it would establish a precedent for commercial and other incompatible uses. Commercial use of this property with large paved parking areas could lead to contaminated runoff to Hayden Lake via the stream flowing into Bourbon Bay. The church currently has a site further to the east. It's been pointed out at Lancaster and Government Way. The site is large enough and could be expanded for acquisition to accommodate the church's entire development plan. Its current location is certainly superior for its members' access from multiple locations around the county. We do not agree with the development proposed acreage should be dictated by the church's desire to be zoned, changed to its zoning use to donate land, at the expense of the existing rural neighbors. This initial step will lead to permanent undesirable change in the basic character of this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person on Zoom. Raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak.
I'll speak if I may.
Go ahead, name and address, please.
Don Vogt, V-O-G-T, 13172 North Rockaway Beach Road in Hayden Lake. And we have used Lancaster Road to access our home on Rockaway Bay for close to 60 years. So we are well aware of the changes that have occurred along Lancaster during this entire time. Of course, we would have liked it to be really rural the way it was there, but that's, of course, unrealistic. But the interesting thing is in all of that time, as the development has proceeded in this area, the uses have remained rural. Yes, there are more houses, and some of them are bigger than they used to be and so on, but it still retains its rural character. Lancaster itself, of course, has been earlier described as it's kind of almost like a freeway with constant construction trucks and so on and everything going on. I think that's been well documented here that you know, you can't look at the church's impact in isolation from all the other things that are going on. You have to look at its contribution to the whole problem there. From a scale point of view, even though the architect talked about trying to minimize its impact, it's wildly out of scale with any other development in the area. And there's only so much you can do to disguise that. Being a prominent spot there, there's no way you could do it unless you probably buried it. The comment was made early on, and we want to focus now on our LUPA, that the ag zone does contemplate churches and schools as conditional uses. And examples were cited, all of which I believe are out in the prairie where there's not a lot of problem with more intensive use. The fact that those exist is only the beginning of the analysis, not the conclusion of the analysis. Just because theoretically it might be possible to have a church in a rural zone doesn't mean that it would be put anywhere in that rural zone. And so you have to look at the surrounding development and uses to decide whether it's compatible with any particular spot. The other thing I would like to say is that our LUPA does not work so that church or wherever, other religious institution can find a spot and go there and say, well, you can't do anything about it because if you do, you're discriminating against me. It doesn't work that way. And there are multiple opportunities within the county jurisdiction to site these kinds of facilities elsewhere that can be accommodated with very little conditions, I suspect, on the potential use. In terms of the compelling public interest, if you, as hearing examiner, find that you need to do that, I think the argument just before was persuasive that you don't even need to get to that. But if for any reason you do, I think the point that hasn't been really emphasized enough is the net result of this development would be about, from what I can see, about 50% of it would be impervious surface. And this entire area drains down ultimately into Bourbon Bay. the county has very limited surface water management strategies currently in place that would be completely inadequate to prevent the runoff from this area getting down to Hayden Lake. Approximately 40% of the homes around Hayden Lake obtain their drinking water directly out of the lake. And this would have an additional cumulative negative impact on water quality of the lake through the introduction of motor oil and radiator coolant and the other associated problems that come with automobiles. So that in itself, if we ever have to get into it, is more than enough of a compelling state interest to preserve the drinking water quality of the lake. We appreciate very much the opportunity to speak, and thank you very much for considering all these comments as you make your revised report.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Good evening.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is David Brown. I'm building a home and I'll be occupying it in May of this year. The address is 12399 North Meadowwood Road, which is just off Lancaster in the Rimrock Meadows subdivision. This is a 10-acre lot, and my wife and I have been very careful to plan out this lot and its use. It's currently, or was, a long-time hayfield, and we're gonna continue with our farming operations, and you would not even know that there's been a measurable change. A number of people have already spoke to the things that I was going to bring up, so there's no necessary big point to reiterate some of those, but I do think I need to speak to a couple things. First of all, this isn't a community church. The people that spoke for approval proved that point quite adequately. I don't even need to go into that. Mission creep is going to happen here. I'm just wondering when the stoplight goes in at Rimrock and Lancaster, because that's going to come. And then the LED light signs, you're going to destroy the nighttime sky in this community with the lights in the lot, the lights from the cars, the lights from the signs. It's going to change the whole fabric of this area. Rimrock is not a major road that the attorney spoke to. It is a 2-lane rural road. That's all it is. It'll probably get busy over time, but he is way off the point of calling it a major road. Lancaster is not a major road. It is a busy road, and it's mostly marked with construction traffic at the time. That's unlikely to change in the foreseeable future, but it is still something that we all have to take into account for. The overwhelming number of people that spoke opposed to this is a clear voice, in my opinion. I just don't see the benefit of it. I do not understand why the church members are looking at this despite all the opposition and want to move forward with a conditional use permit. It makes no sense whatsoever. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'm not seeing any more hands up. If someone is there that would still like to speak, unmute yourself. Going once, going twice.
Is it possible for someone to speak in favor at this time?
Oh, he's asking if he can speak in favor at this time.
Is that somebody on?
It-
I tried to unmute myself earlier, but I didn't get to the unmute in time.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Del Orser. My address is 11834 East Parks Road, Napa. I just wanted to, I appreciate the moment you give me to speak, even though I'm past my time. I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that our members of our church have an interest in the well-being of others wherever they are, whether they are in the community or far and wide. I have been a youth leader in our church for many years. In fact, my wife and I own a business in Coeur d'Alene. We've been here 42 years. And I've seen the changes that have been made in young lives because they've adopted biblical principles in their lives and steered away from drugs and alcohol, and see the blessings that classes have been to them. We have always promoted classes for the community relating to the 8 natural laws of health, and we have a real interest in lifestyle and well-being of others. I assure you that there will be no loud music, alcohol, or drug-related problems that will be coming from this area if we were permitted to build our facility. We always promote equality of all people and appreciate the input that all have in focusing the betterment of others. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. So let's look and see if there are any other hands. Okay.
I'm not seeing any.
All right, then we're going to move into rebuttal. And I'm not sure how the applicant wants to utilize this time, but I hope you do. Okay. Greg and Sandy, it's your opportunity to do rebuttal.
Thank you. This is Greg Embry again, and I'll be brief. As to the current site, the church is simply unable to expand there and offer the capacity and the programs they wish to provide. And some examples are parking requirements simply cannot be met to accommodate all of the individuals that need to attend the various services. The infrastructure limitations make the current site impossible to do what the church is trying to and proposing to do at the new site. Federal case law does make it clear that the mere act of a religious entity going out and acquiring property, going through the permitting process, that is an exercise of religion. So a denial at this proposed new site is a substantial burden on the church because they can do nothing else with it. Federal case law is also clear that even if you can continue at your current site, denial of expansion is a substantial burden, and that's what we have here. Even if cases have also been clear that the ability to perform some desired activities, but not all at a current site, does not make the burden insubstantial. The San Jose Christian School versus City of Oregon case law relied upon by the opposition. That case stands for the proposition that requiring the Christian school to submit a complete application, that alone is not a substantial burden. That's not what we're arguing. We don't have any problem at all going through the permitting entitlement process. What we're arguing is that a denial does work a substantial burden in a number of discrete ways on the church. That leaves us with one remaining question, and that is there a compelling interest that justifies denial? And to that I would offer no governmental agency has objected. There are certainly some appropriate conditions that can be crafted to shape this application, But the traffic concerns, while I respect them and they are real to neighboring owners, is not the same thing as a compelling governmental interest, because no governmental agency has identified a public safety issue associated with traffic. And so we would therefore ask that the permit receive a recommendation of approval with appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Sandy, are you?
Yes, and just to follow up after Greg, I heard comments on stormwater runoff, sewer water, lighting. Again, all of those are situations that can be mitigated through conditions of approval. The county already has those regulations in place. So the stormwater portion of the zoning code protects groundwater and any type of runoff to surface water, so Hayden Lake. And then as far as lighting goes, digital signs aren't allowed in the county. All lighting has to be downward directed and shielded. So those are fears that neighbors have that are understandable, but they are unfounded as there are protections already in place. When I heard Mr. Franz talk about real life ministries, just a clarification there on the church. The church that Mr. Embry was referring to was the approval of a conditional use permit at the intersection of Hutter and Meyer Roads, which you don't get any more rural than that. There are not even subdivisions out there at the time when this was approved over 5 years ago. And it was a church that was seeing 3,000 people a week. So, and that was on ag land in an area, and it was on viable ag land that the church had purchased at the time. So I just want to set the record straight on that. The county drafts, and I worked for the county for 10 years, and I was part of drafting those goals and policies, but it drafts goals, policies, rules, regulations, everything that a reasonable person can base their reasonable application upon. And when an applicant, such as the church in this case, meets those requirements, the expectation is set that here's the threshold, here are the parameters, we can meet those, and oh, by the way, no public agencies have an issue with it. Even the county itself expressed no opposition. Then it's reasonable to expect that the time and the money that you put forth is going to result in something that you see all across rural America. I guess my frustration is you go into any rural area, as rural as it can be in Idaho, and you see three things. You see a post office, you see a church, and you see a school. We're not asking for commercial development that is outside of anything that a community in itself uses. And that's it all. I have nothing further.
Based on a good bit of the testimony, both in writing and tonight, there were a number of comments related to uses of this facility beyond the Saturday morning service, the school, such things as youth rallies and the seminars that were held in October. And none of those items were included in the traffic study. Could you speak to how those impacts? And I guess the public doesn't feel like they've got a very good understanding about what this facility will be used for, all those square feet.
Okay, so a full traffic impact analysis was not done at this time, and it would be highly unusual to have one done before a conditional use permit is approved. What we did was an analysis based on, generally speaking, using ITD's Transportation Trip Generation Manual, just generally speaking, what types of traffic might be anticipated. A condition of approval can certainly be that a full traffic impact analysis be prepared contemplating all of those other uses, the rallies, anything else that's been mentioned here, and then the governing authority, the Lakes Highway District, would be the one to review that and then determine if any type of infrastructure improvement needs to be made to accommodate that. And I believe Mr. Callahan even testified to that fact that that's beyond his jurisdiction, so it really needs to go back to Lakes Highway District. And just as a side note, I did have a discussion with Eric Shanley, the district engineer, and he was in concurrence with that would be anticipated, a full traffic impact analysis.
Since my eyesight was not very good, could you also speak to the concern that was raised about a dotted line on the site plan that reflected expansion?
I think if the pastor is present, he might better be able to address that. Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is David Morgan. Would you like the address again?
Yes, please.
David Morgan. My address is 30755 North Caravelle Road in Athol, Idaho. If we could bring up the
I'm trying.
image in question.
I can't remember how I got the large version.
Well,
bear with me.
As you notice, has been stated, I had to been down here being so tall. There is the church in the gray area, which is phase 2, and what is highlighted as black or darker is the gymnasium multi-purpose building, and then you have the classrooms, and then further down closer to where the church would be the kitchen area and some other rooms and administration offices. So the dotted line would be expansion of classrooms for the school if needed as we grow.
So, but that's over and above the 42,000 square feet that's part of this conditional use permit request, yes?
I don't know if that is in addition to that number. Correct. Maybe, is that correct,
Okay.
Brant? Brant is the designer.
And Brant, can you speak to, I mean, you've marked that space out. What does that reflect in terms of square footage, do you think? Yes, please.
Brant Hay again. First, I want to say that both in the last meeting and in this meeting, it was specifically stated that everybody presenting this project is intentionally lying about this dashed line and trying to conceal whatever this reality. And I don't know what that imagined reality is, but I can state categorically nothing is being attempted to be concealed on this. Where this comes from is, I as an architect, I design buildings, and I do my best to anticipate things that might happen in the future, even if we don't know anything about them. Most people I know at some point imagine changing something on their house, adding on, renovating. I've done more renovations on projects than I can count. And so when I talk to the church and they say, okay, we're a homeschool co-op and we have this many families and we don't know what the future holds. When I do a plan, it's my job to imagine, okay, well, you know, maybe this is all the students they'll ever have, but what happens if they get more? We never know what the future holds. And so I always try to provide a place where if there's a possibility that in the future they might want to do something, to try to anticipate it. Now in this case, it's a school that's possible that, you know, they might want to add on to it. I've never heard anything from the school about anything specific relating to that in terms of we think we're going to do this down the future, other than, well, if our school started getting more kids who wanted to come to this 2-day-a-week co-op, where will we put them? And so for me, I drew it on the plan and was just a dash, and I said, this is a place you could do that if that happened. But there's been no planning or anything else beyond me just trying to do that as a courtesy to them. So in terms of size, it's really up in the air. I can tell you the width of that massing is about, I believe it's about 70 feet wide. And a classroom module, at least the way those are in this first one, is about 15, 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that range in terms of width, probably closer to 18. So what you're looking at is if that was to expand, I would think they would probably expand in an increment of probably about 15 to 20 feet in width. And so at that, you'd be looking at a 1,500-foot increment. So if at some point in the future they needed 2 classrooms, that'd be about the 1,500 square feet increment. So that'd be my best guess. But I'm happy to answer any other questions, even though I don't have a lot of specifics to provide.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Vlad, you have something you wish to add?
I'd like to, if I may.
Yes,
I'd like
please.
to clarify something on behalf of the department.
Yep.
There was a statement made by one of the folks testifying that they had a conversation with myself representing the department on the specific sideboards of how any given project is being reviewed. What I am about to enter into the record is not just specifically related to tonight's hearing. It's a matter of how the procedural process on any given application is handled by staff in our department. Specifically, a conditional use permit. It could be a subdivision, it could be a zone change, it could be a special notice permit, or any other application for that matter. But specifically for a conditional use permit, in Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, Title 8, subsection 88201, subsection C, there is a list of required findings that the hearing body must make, which is listed under 1A through G. Those specific findings allude to the subject parcel and the subject request on which it's being made. There is no statement or the ability to use some discretionary measure to assess other similar sites or uses by the applicant elsewhere in the county. And so what we as a department, as staff, are obligated to do is to review the merits of the case on the subject, on the parcel in question and the request that's before us. We don't have the option to say that whether it's a subdivision that the developer is proposing in this area, just because they have a number of other applications elsewhere in the county, that they should be deprived of that right. Similar matter could be made in this case. I'm strictly talking about the required findings and what the county is responsible for doing when we write a staff report, including findings of fact, applicable legal standards, and conclusions of law. And that's how staff prepared a staff report in this case. That analogy could be used for any other application that we process any given day.
Thank you. That I'm afraid you had your time. So we just did rebuttal, and yeah, you're not the applicant, and I was taking rebuttal from the applicant. Oh, you are? Oh, okay.
My name is Don Eckenroth. I live at 528 East Dana Court in Hayden, Idaho. First of all, I would like to say you did very well with my last name. You can't imagine what has been done to it over the years. But I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you have provided a forum in which an exchange of ideas can take place. This is what America is about. We have in our Constitution the opportunity for the freedom of speech. And I would like to say that we have had a very spirited conversation this evening, and that's healthy. And we respect all who have spoken without regard to whether they're speaking in favor or whether they're speaking against. I would like to address a couple things and be as brief as possible. First of all churches draw from their immediate areas or neighborhoods, but most also draw from, I'm sorry, okay. Most also draw from a wider area than their immediate location. And so that is not true, not only true of us, but it's true of most any church in the area. As far as special events are concerned, that has been mentioned just moments ago, most churches have them. They hold concerts, they have homecomings, they have special holiday events like Christmas, Thanksgiving, etc. So there's nothing unusual about having special events. There was one comment that suggested that a walk-in clinic was being planned and not being mentioned. As the chairman of the Building and Planning Committee, there has never been any discussion of a walk-in clinic in our deliberations. Another area that I'd like to mention, contaminants have been mentioned many times this evening. But I would suggest that everyone who lives in the area contributes to some degree to that contamination. Whether fertilizing their lawns, whether driving their automobiles, whatever. Everyone contributes to that. And then the final thing that I'd like to speak to has to do with the Sunday services that was mentioned that are being held at our church. There's a congregation that approached us a few months ago. Because of the COVID restrictions, they have been holding their services outside through the summer. Because their congregation is larger than their building can accommodate because of the COVID restrictions. And so they asked us if they could rent our facility temporarily until the spring. And so we've granted that. We felt it was the Christian thing to do, to allow them to conduct their services in our church. And just want to say thank you for the time that you granted me to speak, and to all that are here.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our hearing this evening on CUP 19-0004. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and for your input. I appreciate it very much, both in person and on Zoom.